हेलो गाइस, वेलकम बैक टू द चैनल यूट्यूब डीमिस्टिफाइड। एंड चलिए कंटिन्यू करते हैं हमारे बीए फिलोसफी ऑनर्स के सेमेस्टर 3 सेकेंड ईयर्स के कोर्स के साथ। सो नाउ वी आर स्टार्टिंग विद सोशल एंड पॉलिटिकल फिलोसफी, जिसका हम लोग यूनिट 1 कर रहे हैं। दैट इज़ अंडरस्टैंडिंग पॉलिटिकल फिलोसफी एंड इट्स बेसिक कॉन्सेप्ट्स, एंड वी आर डूइंग इट थ्रू एन आर्टिकल बाय लियो स्ट्रॉस। बेसिकली ये एक मैगज़ीन जर्नल ऑफ पॉलिटिक्स में, एक जर्नल ऑफ पॉलिटिक्स में पब्लिश हुआ था ये राइटअप, and this we are doing by Leo Strauss. So हम लोग basically what we are going to study and discuss in this political philosophy, and what is political philosophy is how it started with Socrates and Aristotle, sorry not Socrates, but Plato and Aristotle in Athens, how it started, and how it gradually came to an end, and everything for that matter. So that is what we're going to discuss about, a little background कि जब political philosophy start किया गया था एथेंस में, सो हाउ वॉज इट, प्लेटो एरिस्टोटल इसको कैसे प्रैक्टिस करते थे, एंड टुडे कैसे पॉलिटिकल फिलोसफी चेंज हो गया है, एंड वील डिस्कस लाइक फ्रॉम द वेरी बेसिक्स टू टुडे till the point in the present, that how it has come so far. So political philosophy का meaning and मतलब इसका meaningful character are as evident today as they have been since the time when political philosophy first made its appearance in Athens. So of course, how important political philosophy is, उसका हम it has been very clear to us from day one. All political action aims at either preservation or change. सो पॉलिटिकल एक्शन किस पे एम करता है, या तो जो चीज़ पहले से अच्छी है उसको प्रिजर्व करके रखना, सो दैट दैट थिंग डजेंट चेंज टू वर्स, or it aims to change that today what is outdated today, it changes and comes into and evolves itself into a better position. So political action का aim होता है first मतलब either to preserve or to change. Preservation उस केस में when something is changing into something bad, so we need to preserve it so that it doesn't become worse, but it stays good, it remains good and fruitful. Or the either the aim is to preserve or to change to कि हो जाता है कई बार कि things become outdated, so they are not as fruitful as they used to be at a point of time, so change them to better so that it yields better results. Okay, so when desiring to preserve, we wish to prevent a change to the worse. When desiring change, we wish to bring out something better. All political action is then guided by some thought of better or worse. So, whenever a political action takes place, what is the core thought or the core motive behind that political action is either to preserve something which is already good, or change something which is not very good and change it into something better. All but thought of better or worse implies thought of the good, the awareness of the good which guides all our actions as the character of opinion. It is no longer questioned, but on reflection it proves to be questionable. So whenever we're thinking about better or worse, ठीक है, जब हम प्रिजर्वेशन या चेंज की बात कर रहे हैं, what is the fundamental thought of it? That is goodness. That whether we're doing it for the betterment, whether we're changing it or preserving it, our fundamental motive for something is that the good comes out of it. Okay, the very fact that we can question it directs us towards such a thought of the good as is no longer questionable, towards a thought which is no longer opinion but knowledge. So there's a difference between opinion and knowledge. When there is a character of opinion, we can question it. Because why we can question? Because it's an opinion, it's not an established fact, it's not a knowledge. A knowledge is when you have a concrete belief in something, when you have gained it with the accumulation of certain facts, and then you have reached a conclusion that, and it's not necessary that knowledge is constant. Maybe, if you have the knowledge that something is good today, it may be bad tomorrow. But for today, if you have the knowledge that that thing is good, that means you have an established set of facts and you have your own justifications. So knowledge is something very very concrete, something very strong, as compared to opinion. Opinion always are, opinions always are matter to flicker, because that's not concrete knowledge, that's not there's no certainty in opinion. So opinion is always questionable. All political action has then in itself a directedness towards knowledge of the good life or the good society, for the good society is the complete political good. So all the political actions that happen, they happen, it can be said as a reason, because the main aim of that political action is to bring out the good in the society. And basically a good society is what the political action should yield. That is what the motto of any political action should be and is. If this directedness becomes explicit, if men make it their explicit goal to acquire knowledge of the good life and of the good society, political philosophy emerges. So this explicitity, explicitity, or matlab, when men decide that our goal is the good life and good society, that is when political philosophy emerges. So basically, what the author or what the writer is trying to say is that the main aim of political philosophy is to bring out the good in the society, is to establish a good society. And when men decide that they want a good life, that they want a good society, not only for themselves, but for everybody, every living being, everyone to whom the political action will affect. When the men decide that there should be good life and a good society for every single being and a living person or a living thing, that is when political philosophy emerges, its needs, its consequences, its results, everything. By calling this pursuit political philosophy, we imply that it forms a part of a larger whole. So, of course, we are talking about political philosophy. Now, as we have progressed to Sem 3 of our, bachelor degrees, so we have already learned something about what is philosophy, what it questions, what it encompasses in its area of study. So, when we say political philosophy, we are basically referring to one component of philosophy, one part of philosophy, which includes many other things. It includes ethics, it includes so many other things. So, when we are talking about political philosophy, we are talking about a part of the whole of philosophy. Philosophy is a whole subject, and from that philosophy, we're talking only about the political philosophy, the philosophy which regards the political actions of something. Since political philosophy is a branch of philosophy, even the most provisional explanation of what political philosophy is cannot dispense with an explanation, however provisional, of what philosophy is. So, of course, because political philosophy is a part of philosophy, it has to include what philosophy is. So, whatever political philosophy is, no matter what, no matter how vague we may sound it to be, how different or how much we distinguish from it, it will never leave that component of philosophy from it, because it is a part of the whole. Philosophy as quest for wisdom is quest for universal knowledge, for knowledge of the whole. Very, very simply, very simple terms, we've already discussed that what is philosophy? It's a quest for wisdom. Philosophy means love for wisdom. Philosophy, love for wisdom. So in wisdom of any kind, of for any matter, for any subject. So when you have a deep knowledge, when you have wisdom about any subject matter, what is that? That is the philosophy of that subject. So it is the knowledge of the whole universe, the knowledge of the whole everything. The quest would not be necessary if such knowledge were immediately available. Of course, we have also discussed this in if you're strictly looking from an exam point of view, we've also discussed this in I think semester 1 or semester 2. It was an article by Derek Parfit where he questions, where he says that is this knowledge about the universe, about the whole, it's not readily available. So yes, the quest would not be necessary if such knowledge were immediately available. Philosophy would not have been necessary अगर हमें वो knowledge सीधे सीधे directly मिल जाती, but it's not. We have to search for it a lot. We have to argue, we have to look for evidences, we have to look for facts, we have to look for opinions. We cannot miss anything. that knowledge about whether it is about the whole, any subject matter, it's not readily available to us. We have to bring us down to that knowledge. The absence of knowledge of the whole does not mean, however, that men do not have thoughts about the whole. We don't know anything about the whole today. There are so many different views. Some say that the world is created by God. Some say the universe is running on itself. Some say there is a law which is running the universe, which is, organizing everything. Some say that there is no God, there is nobody. You just after death, you just mix your, with the universe. So of course, there's no knowledge about the whole. Until now, we don't know anything about the universe, its workings, what happens to soul after death, nothing about it. So that doesn't mean that we don't have thoughts about whole. We constantly think about it. That's how most of the religions, well, that's the better part of most of the religions today. They talk about the universe, they talk about the whole, the soul, life after death, what is life, how one comes into being, what is a living being, what is a non-living being, who controls the universe, all of these things. So we don't have any knowledge about it. And why we are saying knowledge is because we have opinions. We don't have knowledge, that means we don't have a base, we don't have a proof for all the opinions that we hold. So that thing, we have opinions about the universe, but we don't have knowledge until now. So we don't have any knowledge about the universe. But that does not mean that we are not thinking about it, that we're not looking for solutions about it. We are trying to get closer to it as possible. That doesn't mean we just leave the subject be it. Philosophy is necessarily preceded by opinions about the whole. So of course, philosophy is quest, or for wisdom. So it's of course preceded by opinions. First you have an opinion about something, and that is when an opinion, when you test it out and when you argue your opinion with other people, that is when it becomes knowledge. That is when you subsidize it down to, or the true form of it. It is therefore the attempt to replace opinions about the whole by the knowledge of the whole. Very simply, as I've said, that when we have opinions about something, then we put it to test. We discuss it with other people. We argue on our opinions with other people. We look for evidences, facts, everything. And that is why we turn our opinions into knowledge. When we have tested out our opinions, and if the opinions are true, it becomes knowledge. If they are not, then we have to adopt to other opinions. Instead of the whole, philosophers also say all things. The whole is not a pure ether or an unrelieved darkness in which one cannot distinguish one part from the other, or in which one cannot discern anything. So when philosophers also, instead of saying the whole, they say all things. Because when we refer to something as the whole, we are automatically connecting everything to one another. Now, we are not really sure whether everything is connected or not. Everything is a part of a bigger substance or not. Maybe they are different individual things. So, philosophers would like to refer to it as all things, that they are different things. That the whole is not, something, a pure darkness from which one can, well, a pure darkness, because we don't know anything about it. So whole is not some pure darkness where we cannot distinguish one part of it from another. So instead of the whole, philosophers like to refer to it as all things. A quest for knowledge of all things means quest for knowledge of God, the world, and man, or rather quest for the knowledge of the nature of all things. The natures and their totality are the whole. So when all of these things are totaled together, their nature basically means how they work. What are they made of? What do they consist of? What do they interact with? What do they do not interact with? Everything about it, all the possible pieces of information about something is its nature. So the totality of the nature of all things, that is what the whole is. Philosophy is essentially not possession of the truth, but quest for the truth. So, as it has been, already said by famous philosophers, that with philosophy, I'm totally rephrasing here. I don't remember the exact words, but philosophy is not where you start with an answer. You start with a doubt, you start with a question. You move from uncertainty towards certainty. So when we start with philosophy, we don't know anything. And from nothing, we move towards something, and then towards everything. We are in the process of, moving towards everything. So of course, philosophy doesn't start with everything. We know nothing. We don't know anything about philosophy when we start with it. The distinctive trait of the philosopher is that he knows nothing. So what makes, now everybody thinks about these things. Everybody thinks about the universe. Everybody thinks about the questions about whole, the nature, the man, everything. They have opinions about everything. So what is that one single trait that distinguishes a philosopher from a common man who also thinks about the same things as a philosopher? What is the job of a philosopher? He thinks about things. He has opinions about certain questions, and a common man also has. But that one thing that distinguishes a philosopher from a common man is that a philosopher knows that he knows nothing. Philosopher realizes it. A common man or somebody who's not a philosopher, what he will think is that, okay, whatever opinion he has about the universe is the knowledge. But the philosopher knows the difference between opinion and knowledge. So the philosopher knows, he realizes it, that he knows nothing about anything. And that his insight into our ignorance concerning the most important things induces him to strive with all his power for knowledge. So that philosopher also knows that when we ignore certain things, when we ignore the gravity of things, that there can be other ways the universe is also existing. That is when the philosopher is even more intrigued to search for the answer. So he would cease to be a philosopher by evading the questions concerning those things or by disregarding them because they cannot be answered. So a philosopher will stop being a philosopher the moment he says that, okay, there can be no answers to this question, so let's just stop thinking about it, or let's just stop looking for answers about it. Because there are people who would say that, oh, please just stop thinking about the universe, the life after death, everything in totality, because you will never be able to find answer. That doesn't mean that you stop immediately. Maybe we can never find a definitive answer, but we can always be closer to it. We can always be solving more and more things, understanding more and more things. Maybe not that particular thing, but things related to it. It may be that as regards the possible answers to these questions, the pros and cons will always be in a more or less even balance, and therefore the stage of discussion or disputation will never reach the stage of decision. So it is possible always that when we have opinion about something, of course a group of people will have the pros of it, and the another group of people will have cons of it. What I mean to say is that all the opinions that we hold about something, it's totally, it is generally the case that it is refuted by the other group, by the opposite group. So what we mean by this is that it balances things out. We may never be able to reach to a stage of decision where we make a decision, because whenever we have a theory with us, the other party just refuses the theory by bringing in evidences, and we have to fall for it, that yes, that theory that they are saying, that our theory is not as good as we have thought of. So it may happen that at the end of the day we never be able to reach a decision. There always, we always have the equal number of pros as equal number of cons about a topic. That does not mean that philosophy is futile. That does not mean that philosophy is of no use. For the clear grasp of a fundamental question requires understanding of the nature of that subject matter with which the question is concerned. So when we try to inquire about anything, we try to inquire about the nature of that thing, to grasp the meaning of it, the making of it, the building of it, the components of it, everything. Genuine knowledge of a fundamental question, thorough understanding of it, is better than blindness to it or indifference to it. So of course the genuine knowledge about anything is much better than just being blind to it. Then it's always better to know something than to know nothing about anything. Okay, so be that in reference or blindness accompanied by knowledge of the answers to a vast number of peripheral or ephemeral questions or not. It may be possible that we don't get the answer to the exact thing, but we may get closer to the things around it, the periphery of it. Of philosophy, thus understood, political philosophy is a branch. So of course, in this section we have defended why philosophy is not futile, why it's not useless. We may not have definitive answers, but that does not mean we stop asking these questions, we stop trying to get the answers to these questions. So in the first part we've discussed about what is philosophy, why is it important, why it's not useless. Now let's come to political philosophy. Of course, political philosophy is a branch of philosophy, so it has to have everything of philosophy. Okay. Now, it's not necessary that philosophy will have everything of political philosophy, but political philosophy has to have all the characteristics of philosophy, because political philosophy is a part of philosophy. Okay. Political philosophy will then be the attempt to replace opinion about the nature of political things by knowledge of the nature of political things. So, political philosophy is again, in philosophy, as we replace opinions with knowledge. Similarly, in political philosophy, we replace the opinions of political things by the knowledge of political things. So, political things are by their nature subject to approval and disapproval, choice and rejection, praise and blame. It is of their essence not to be neutral, but to raise a claim to men's obedience, allegiance, decision, or judgment. One does not understand them as what they are, as political things, if one does not take seriously their explicit or implicit claim to be judged in terms of goodness or badness, of justice or injustice. That is, if one does not measure them by some standard of goodness or justice. So, until and unless we measure the political things to be good or bad, to be right or wrong, till then they cannot be true political things. Political things needs to be judged. We have read about this, if I'm not wrong, in ethics, something about positive sciences, normative sciences, how ethics is not a positive science but a normative science, because normative sciences are judged to be good or bad, but positive sciences are not. We have also taken the example of a botanist who cannot judge a plant to be good or bad. He or she just has to lay out the characteristics of that plant. Okay, but a practitioner of ethics, ethical person has all the right and has to engage in what is ethically right and wrong, what is good and bad. So, political things, according to Leo Strauss, needs to be judged by the standards of good or bad, by the standards of justice, just or unjust. We cannot just leave them to be. If political philosophy wishes to do justice to a subject matter, it must strive for genuine knowledge of these standards. Political philosophy is the attempt truly to know about the nature of political things and the right or the good political order. So basically, political philosophy will include the nature of the political things, the genuine knowledge of the nature of political things, and the genuine knowledge of the right, the good political order. Which is the right political order, which is the good political order. All knowledge of political things implies assumptions concerning the nature of political things, that is, assumptions which concern not merely the given political situation but political life or human life as such. So one cannot know anything about a war going on at a given time without having some notion, however dim and daisy, of war as such, as its place within human life as such. So whatever knowledge of political things means that we have to have some assumptions about those political things, about the nature of those political things. Okay, and assumptions are different than opinions, because in assumption we assume something to be, okay, we imagine it to be in that particular way. Okay, opinion is something that we hold of it, where we know what can be the other end of it. Opinion is basically that from between two views you choose one, that is your opinion about that subject matter. But assumption is assuming that that has to be the way that thing is. So the knowledge of political things have to include the assumption about that particular nature of that political things. Okay, which not only concern the given political situation but political life or human life as such. So in political philosophy, when we are assuming, when we are concerned with the nature of political things, we not only focus on the political life as such, we also have to focus on its relation to the human life, to the totality of it. Okay, now they have given us an example, like one cannot see a policeman as a policeman without having made an assumption about law and government as such. So, when we are talking about a policeman, we have to have some assumption about what is law, how it needs to be maintained, what is the government who controls the policeman. So, there has to be a backdrop. So, when we're talking about political things, maybe like for example, we may talk about justice. So, before talking about justice, we need to have a backdrop of it. We cannot just jump right on to justice as such. Okay. The assumptions concerning the nature of political things, which are implied in all knowledge of political things, have the character of opinions. It is only when these assumptions are made the theme of critical and coherent analysis that a philosophic or scientific approach to politics emerge. So, when we put these assumptions to test, to a scientific test, to critical analysis means when you're also criticizing it, we're also you're seeing the opposite of it. You're trying to comprehend the everything of it, the pros and the cons, and coherent analysis, a very deep analysis of it. That is when we reach to a scientific approach towards these political things. The cognitive status of political knowledge is not different from that of the knowledge possessed by the shepherd, the husband, the general, or the cook. Yet the pursuits of these types of men do not give rise to pastoral, marital, military, or culinary philosophy because their ultimate goals are sufficiently clear and unambiguous. The ultimate political goal, on the other hand, urgently calls for coherent reflection. The goal of the general is victory, whereas the goal of the statesman is the common good. What victory means is not essentially controversial, but the meaning of the common good is essentially controversial. The ambiguity of the political goal is due to its comprehensive character. Now, when we're talking about the political knowledge, okay, for example, whatever knowledge is possessed by, say, a husband, okay, that knowledge does not give life to marital philosophy. No. Why? Because in such cases, for example, as they are given of the general, for the general, it's clear that the end goal is victory. Now, no matter whether the victory is controversial, whether he's fighting from the wrong or the right side, whether it's good, bad, anything. For the general, the end goal is victory, and that is clear. That the soldier, for that matter, for that soldier, he knows or she knows one thing, that the end is to win for their country, that they have to fight, they have to kill as many people from the other side as possible. Now the soldier does not really engages in, okay, whatever the leaders are doing, is that right, are they fighting for the right cause? No. But in political philosophy, the goal is never clear. It's always controversial, and the reason for it that is controversial is because of its comprehensive character. It has a lot of pros and cons in it. When, because like the goal of political philosophy is the common good, the good life for everybody, and that is not possible. You cannot, having good for everybody is an utopian version of political philosophy. You cannot possibly have something which is good for everybody. Common good will always be controversial. If something is good for one person, it has to be bad for the other person, it has to be unbeneficial for the other person. So, because political philosophy's character is very comprehensive, it includes in itself so many things around, so many aspects of life, so many views, so many opinions, character of opinions. That means that the goal of political philosophy can never be clear. It will always be ambiguous. It will always be unclear as to what is that goal. The goal will always be controversial when you have reached that goal, whether you have actually reached the goal or not. Thus, the temptation arises to deny or to evade the comprehensive character of politics and to treat politics as one compartment among many. This temptation must be resisted if we are to face our situation as human beings, that is, the whole situation. So, what temptation arises because of this comprehensive character is that the politics of it is a part of it. The politics is a part of that political philosophy. So this temptation be resisted if we are to face our situation as human beings. We have to face the situation as whole. Political philosophy, as we have tried to circumscribe it, has been cultivated since its beginnings almost without any interruption until a relatively short time ago. Today, political philosophy is in a state of decay and perhaps of putrefaction if it has not vanished altogether. So, what he's trying to say is that when political philosophy emerged in Athens by Plato and Aristotle, from then until a short time ago, from then until a short time ago, political philosophy was very comprehensively practiced, very well practiced, discussed about, and all of that. But today, political philosophy is in a state of decay. We no more discuss about political philosophy the way that we should be, according to the writer. Not only there is there complete disagreement regarding its subject matter, its methods and its functions, its very possibility in any form has become questionable. So today, political philosophy has reduced to a very mere questionable form of anything. Okay, the only point regarding which academic teachers of political science still agree concerns the usefulness of studying the history of political philosophy. So today, political philosophy is rendered almost useless. And the only point or the only aspect of political philosophy that is agreed upon and studied, taught by the teachers, by the professors, is only the history of political philosophy, how it started, how it developed, how it grew, how it was accepted by other philosophers, etc. So today, according to the writer, political philosophy stands no place. As regards the philosophers, it is sufficient to contrast the work of the four greatest philosophers of the last 40 years, Bergson, Whitehead, Husserl, and Heidegger, with the work of Hermann Cohen in order to see how rapidly and thoroughly political philosophy has become discredited. So, it's basically that how the work of these four philosophers is contradicted with the work of a single philosopher, Hermann Cohen. So basically, these all these five philosophers, when you read about them, if you want to, you can always read about them. So there will be a lot of, like, continental philosophy, neo-Kantism, Kantianism, and basically Hermann Cohen was very much a Kantian and a neo-Kantist. So there's a huge difference between what Immanuel Kant proposed and his philosophy, to see how rapidly and thoroughly political philosophy has become discredited. We may describe the present situation as follows. Originally, political philosophy was identical with political science, and it was all embracing study of human affairs. Today, we find it cut into pieces which behave as if they were parts of a worm. So earlier, political philosophy was whole. Political science and all things related to human affairs was considered under political philosophy. Today, it is cut into so many fragments. There's sociology, there's political science, there's psychology. There are so many different subjects that it has broken down into. In the first place, one has applied the distinction between philosophy and science to the study of human affairs, and accordingly, one makes a distinction between a non philosophical political science and a non scientific political philosophy, a distinction which, under present conditions, takes away all dignity, all honesty from political philosophy. So today we have applied a distinction to philosophy and science. It's true. We have, earlier philosophy was a one huge great subject which encompassed in it so many different subjects. But today, what the case is, philosophy is different, science is different, and there is something where we have taken the philosophical character out of political science and the scientific character out of political philosophy. And that should not happen according to the author, because it is something that talks about the totality of all human affairs, and it should be considered as one and studied altogether and not as these different subjects. Furthermore, large segments of what formerly belonged to political philosophy or political science have become emancipated under the names of economics, sociology, and social psychology. So, today, political philosophy and all of this has broken down into so many different streams: sociology, economics, social psychology. The pitiable rump for which honest social scientists do not care is left as prey to philosophers of history and to people who amuse themselves more than others with professions of faith. We hardly exaggerate when we say that today political philosophy does not exist anymore except as matter for burial, that is, for historical research, or else as a theme of weak and unconvincing protestations. So today, whatever is left of political philosophy is to study its history and nothing else. Everything else has been, murdered down, according to the writer. If we inquire into the reasons for this great change, we receive these answers. Political philosophy is unscientific, or it is unhistorical, or it is both. Science and history, those two great powers of the modern world, have eventually succeeded in destroying the very possibility of political philosophy. So, according to Leo, one of the reasons why political philosophy has been so, murdered down is that today political philosophy is unscientific. They don't consider philosophy as a scientific subject. Philosophy and science are two very different themes, and considered as almost as opposites of each other. Okay, or it is unhistorical, or both. So science and history, these two great powers of the modern world, have eventually succeeded in destroying the very possibility of political philosophy, because science and history, how much they have separated from each other, and that is one of the reasons why political philosophy has also just vanished. The rejection of political philosophy as unscientific is characteristic of present day positivism. Positivism is no longer what it desired to be when Auguste Comte originated it. It still agrees with Comte by maintaining that modern science is the highest form of knowledge, precisely because it aims no longer, as theology and metaphysics did, at absolute knowledge of the why, but only at the relative knowledge of the how. So basically, देखिए, पॉलिटिकल फ़िलॉसफ़ी को अनसाइंटिफिक इसलिए बोल दिया गया है क्योंकि पॉजिटिविज़म की वजह से. अब पॉजिटिविज़म क्या है? पॉजिटिविज़म जो है वो डायरेक्टली मेटाफिज़िक्स को, थियोलॉजी को रिजेक्ट करता है, बिकॉज मेटाफिज़िक्स एंड थियोलॉजी किस पे एम करते हैं? द एब्सोल्यूट नॉलेज ऑफ द why are the things happening, what is the reason of it, and how is the मतलब कैसे work कर रहा है, why is the universe existing, all of these things. Okay, but मतलब metaphysics and theology इन चीज़ों पे डिपेंड करते हैं, इन चीज़ों पे वर्क करते हैं, एंड पॉजिटिविज्म वर्क्स एट द रिलेटिव नॉलेज ऑफ द हाउ. ओके, सो ऑगस्ट कॉम्टे जो थे, ही वाज अ फिलोसोफर जिन्होंने पॉजिटिविज्म को का बर्थ किया था, मतलब को he originated positivism, but today positivism is not like that. Basically positivism का मतलब है positive science जो हमने पढ़ा है, which is strictly based on rules, regulations, facts, basically scientific theory which can be achieved. So modern science is the highest form of knowledge, because it's the absolute knowledge of, it's a very concrete form of knowledge. But after having been modified by utilitarianism and evolutionism and neo-Kantianism, it has abandoned completely Comte's hope that a social science modeled on modern natural science would be able to overcome the intellectual anarchy of modern society. So, in about the last decade of the 19th century, social science positivism reached its final form by realizing or decreeing that there is a fundamental difference between facts and values, and that only factual judgments are within the competence of science. Scientific social science is incompetent to pronounce value judgments and must avoid value judgments altogether. As for the meaning of the term value, in statements of this kind, we can hardly say more than that values mean both things preferred and principles of preference. So basically, if you have seen my previous videos where we discuss the difference between positive science एंड नॉर्मेटिव साइंस, जब हम एथिक्स को डिस्कस कर रहे थे, उसमें बहुत क्लियरली हमने डिस्टिंग्विश करा है कि कैसे एथिक्स इज़ अ नॉर्मेटिव साइंस और नॉट अ पॉजिटिव साइंस. तो पॉजिटिविज्म जो है, ओके, वो बेसिकली इट वाज ओरिजिनेटेड बाय कॉम्टे, एंड पॉजिटिविज्म का बहुत ही बेसिक सा मतलब यही है, दैट only facts are to be considered. So scientific knowledge जिसे देखा गया है जो है, मतलब that is only which includes the facts. and जितने भी ऐसे साइंसेस हैं, जिसमें हम लोग वैल्यू जजमेंट्स को कंसिडर करते हैं, where we deem something to be good or bad, right or wrong, that do not come under the realm of scientific study, साइंटिफिक रिसर्च. सो क्या हुआ है कि पॉलिटिकल फ़िलॉसफी, हमने फ़िलॉसफी को कहीं ना कहीं साइंस के डोमेन से बाहर शिफ्ट कर दिया, स्पेशली पॉलिटिकल फ़िलॉसफी को, और उसको अनसाइंटिफिक बना दिया है अप्रोच में. एंड दैट इज़ वाई ओनली द मॉडर्न साइंस, आज के समय में हम देख रहे हैं कि साइंस इज़ वॉट इज़ द एब्सोल्यूट, मतलब इज़ द करेक्ट नॉलेज फॉर अस. वट एवर इज़ बीइंग एस्टैब्लिश्ड बाय साइंस, वी वेरी क्विकली जस्ट एक्सेप्ट इट एज अ फैक्ट. सो हुआ ये है दैट मॉडर्न साइंस, जो साइंस है, उसको कहाँ पर आके बहुत ही हमने लिमिट कर दिया है, एट अ प्लेस where only facts are important and only facts are to be deemed as sciences, positive sciences. Other than that, value judgments do not really hold a place in positive sciences. And इस positivism की वजह से political philosophy बहुत downgrade हो गया है. एंड जब हम वैल्यू की बात करते हैं, जब हम वैल्यू जजमेंट्स की बात करें, तो वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट प्रेफरेंस, आर प्रेफरेंसेस, द प्रिंसिपल्स दैट वी प्रेफर. Okay, a discussion of the tenets of social science positivism is today indispensable for explaining the meaning of political philosophy. We must reconsider especially the practical consequences of this positivism. Positivistic social science is value free or ethically neutral. तो जो हम पॉजिटिविस्टिक सोशल साइंस की बात कर रहे हैं, जो पॉजिटिव साइंस का एक पार्ट होता है, इट इज़ एथिकली न्यूट्रल, it is value free. That means you cannot really judge it, you cannot deem it to be right or wrong, ought, should, duty, good, bad, anything. You are to report facts as observed, and that is how the positive social sciences are to be studied. You cannot really ethically judge them in any way. Okay, it is neutral in the conflict between good and evil, however good and evil may be understood. This means that the ground which is common to all social scientists, the ground on which they carry on their investigations and discussions, can only be reached through a process of emancipation from moral judgments, or of abstracting from moral judgments, moral obtuseness in the necessary condition for scientific analysis. तो अगर हमें पॉजिटिव साइंसेस को पढ़ना है, उनकी तरफ एक साइंटिफिक अप्रोच को रखना है, वो हम तभी कर सकते हैं जब हम मॉरल जजमेंट्स को उससे पूरी तरीके से हटा रहे हैं. उसके वैल्यू जजमेंट्स, उसके मॉरल जजमेंट्स हम नहीं डिस्कस कर रहे. फॉर टू द एक्सटेंट टू विच वी आर नॉट इट completely insensitive to moral distinctions, we are forced to make value judgments. The habit of looking at social or human phenomena without making the value judgments is a corroding influence on any preferences. तो अब ये लियो स्ट्रॉस जो कह रहे हैं कि अब हमने ये चीज़ तो कर ली, दैट वी हैव टोटली रिमूव दी साइंटिफिक, मतलब द अनसाइंटिफिक एस्पेक्ट, मतलब हम लोग वी आर डीमिंग दैट वॉट एवर साइंस इज प्रूविंग इज ओनली करेक्ट, एंड साइंस को हम लोग बिल्कुल एथिकली न्यूट्रल बना रहे हैं. वी आर जस्ट सेइंग दैट साइंस इज वॉट इज the reporting of the observed facts as it is. We're not making any value judgments, any moral judgments. We're totally removing it. We're making it totally ethically neutral. Okay, and बहुत ही simpler terms है जो हम इसका मतलब जैसे समझ रहे हैं, that is what it means. So इस वजह से what is happening is that it's corroding its influence on any preferences. ओके, आगे हम लोग इस आर्टिकल में डिस्कस करेंगे हाउ लियो इज ट्राइंग टू टेल अस दैट नो मैटर हाउ हार्ड वी ट्राई, वी कैन नॉट रिमूव द वैल्यू जजमेंट्स फ्रॉम एनीथिंग. हम चाहे उसको कितना भी साइंटिफिक बनाने की कोशिश करें, समवेयर और द अदर वो वैल्यू जजमेंट स्पेशली पॉलिटिकल फिलोसफी में आ ही जाता है. इट इज़ इम्पोर्टेंट. It's not that we cannot avoid it. We should not avoid it as well. These value judgments, these moral judgments, these ethical judgments are important for the subject. Okay? The more serious we are as social scientists, the more completely we develop within ourselves a state of indifference to any goal, or of aimlessness and drifting, a state which may be called nihilism. तो हम जितने ज़्यादा serious social scientists होते हैं, हम लोग क्या करते हैं, एक किसी भी गोल से एक इंडिफरेंस बना लेते हैं, because what we see is that that goal has no end to it. almost to the point of nihilism. Nihilism is basically nothing. The social scientist is not immune to preferences. His activity is a constant fight against the preferences he as a human being and a citizen, and which threaten to overcome his scientific detachment. तो एक social scientist जो होता है, no matter how hard you try, you have to have a preference. हर सोशल साइंटिस्ट की एक ना एक प्रेफरेंस होगी ही होगी, चाहे वो कितना भी एथिकली न्यूट्रल होने की कोशिश क्यों ना कर ले, ठीक है। एंड वो जो ट्राई करता है वो एक कांस्टेंट स्ट्रगल है, वो अपने साइंटिफिक डिटैचमेंट को ओवरकम करने की स्ट्रगल है। He derives the power to counteract these dangerous influences by his dedication to one and only one value, to truth. But according to his principles, truth is not a value which it is necessary to choose. One may reject it as well as choose it. अब क्योंकि साइंटिफिक एनालिसिस में वैल्यू जजमेंट्स नहीं आते हैं, तो देखिए व्हाट द सोशल साइंटिस्ट इज ट्राइंग टू डू इज टू फाइंड द ट्रूथ ऑफ एनीथिंग, बट he may very well ignore truth as a value, because value judgments do not hold the core of the scientific analysis in modern times. So truth is another, is just another value like any other. बाकियों की तरह ट्रूथ भी एक वैल्यू है जिसको सोशल साइंटिस्ट बहुत इजीली रिजेक्ट कर सकता है, बिकॉज दे डोंट फोकस ऑन वैल्यूज, दे डोंट फोकस ऑन एथिक्स, not on morals, but on observed facts. The scientist is a scientist must indeed have chosen it, but neither scientist nor science are simply necessary. Social science cannot pronounce on the question of whether social science itself is good. It is then compelled to teach that society can, with equal right and with equal reason, favor social science as well as suppress it as disturbing, subversive, corrosive, nihilistic. But strangely enough, we find social scientists very anxiously to sell social science, that is to prove that social science is necessary. अब सोशल साइंस एज अ सब्जेक्ट खुद प्रूव नहीं कर सकता कि सोशल साइंस अच्छा है, बुरा है, राइट है, रॉन्ग है, इम्पॉर्टेंट है या नहीं है. But what is happening today is social scientists are trying to sell it. They're trying to repeatedly state the fact how and why social science is so important in this and that. So whatever our preferences, they will argue that regardless of what our preferences are or ends maybe, we wish to achieve our ends. To achieve our ends, we must know what the means are conducive to our ends, but adequate knowledge of the means conducive to any social ends in the social so it's the sole function of social science and only of social science. Hence, social science is necessary for any society, any social movement. Social science is then simply necessary. It is a value from every point of view. So basically, social scientists क्या कर रहे हैं कि social science को as a subject लोगों को sell करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, उनको एक तरीके से encourage करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि you need to just take up social science as more. Social science is important. It is very this and very that. They how they try to explain it is that आपको कोई भी goal achieve करना है, उसके लिए you need to know the way, the conducive way through which you can achieve that goal. And to know the way, you need to have a knowledge of it. You need to know the social, you need to know the social sciences. So they're trying to sell it that to achieve your goal, you need to have a knowledge of things, and that knowledge can only be derived through studying subjects of social sciences. So it is simply necessary. You cannot argue, you cannot say that social science is not. It's just simply necessary, important. But once we grant this, we're seriously tempted to wonder if there are not a few other things which must be values from every point of view or for every thinking human being. Okay, so once we grant this, we're seriously tempted to wonder if there are not a few other things which must be values from every point of view. So अब हम लोग बोल रहे हैं कि social science is a very important value जिसको हर किसी को it's just very important. You need to study social science no matter what. But then there are other values also. There are other points of view also. There are other viewpoints also. Just some sorts of there. It's not necessary that we pick up only that one value. There are other values, and others may agree with that this particular value is not important, but the other one. To avoid this inconvenience, the social scientist will scorn all considerations of public relations or of private advancement and take refuge in the virtuous contention that he does not know, but merely believes that quest for truth is good. Other men may believe with equal right that quest for truth is bad. But what does he mean by this contention? Either he makes a distinction between noble and ignoble objectives, or he refuses to make such a distinction. So, what will any social scientist do is that when we are searching for the quest for truth, that means when you're engaging in philosophy, it is good. But the other person may say that no, it's bad. Learning about the truth of anything, the quest for the truth of anything is just bad. Philosophy is useless. It's bad. So they are both at the same pedestal today, because one may accept it, the other may reject it. That is how it is. One may say it is right, and one may just totally futile, you know totally render it futile, useless. If he makes a distinction between noble and ignoble objectives, he will say there is a variety of noble objectives or of ideals, and that there is no ideal which is compatible with all other ideals. If one chooses truth as one's ideal, one necessarily rejects other ideals. This being the case, there cannot be a necessity, an evident necessity for noble men to choose truth in preference to other ideals. हम बात करें कि देर आर ऑफकोर्स मैनी आइडियल्स टू चूज़ फ्रॉम, एंड एक आइडियल दूसरे के उतना ही इंपॉर्टेंट हो सकता है, एंड देर इज़ नो वन आइडियल विच इज़ कंपैटिबल विथ ऑल अदर आइडियल्स. मतलब जब आप किसी एक आइडियल को ज़्यादा वेटेज दे रहे हैं या उसको आप प्राइम पोजिशन पे रख रहे हैं, देन इट विल एट सम पॉइंट और अदर कॉम्प्रोमाइज विथ अदर आइडियल्स. एंड इट्स वेरी मच ट्रू. आप मान लीजिए a very simple example, that there was a very urgent need, and a man just stole a very little amount of money, and it was totally harmless. Well, he stole from a person who already has a lot of money. It was totally harmless. There was no point. Everybody was happy. Well, the man stole the money. He put it to good use to save his family or anything like that, and there was no harm in any case. Now, for example, you're taking truth to be your prime ideal. Now, there are other ideals as justice, harmony, love, peace, all of these. Now, when you take one ideal as truth to be your prime ideal, what will you do? If tomorrow the police or anybody comes knocking to your door asking, do you know who stole the money? You need to tell us. If your prime ideal is truth, you will have to tell the truth. But from other points of view, maybe from harmony, peace, kindness, from justice, maybe from other points of view, from other ideals, it may not be compatible. But just because you're saying you're choosing truth as your prime ideal, that means you will have to be in contrast with the other ideals. So there is not one particular ideal that is compatible with all other ideals. जो सभी आइडियल्स के साथ कंपैटिबल हो, सभी आइडियल्स के साथ अग्री करें एट एवरी पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम. But as long as the social scientist speaks of ideals and thus makes a distinction between noble and not noble objectives, or between idealistic integrity and petty egoism, he makes a value judgment which, according to his fundamental contention, is as such no longer necessary. तो जब सोशल साइंटिस्ट आइडियल्स की बात करता है, ठीक है, सो ही इज़ मेकिंग अ डिस्टिंक्शन बिटवीन नोबल एंड नॉट नोबल ऑब्जेक्टिव्स. आइडियलिस्टिक इंटेग्रिटी एंड पेटी इगोइज्म, मतलब इन सब चीज़ों में जब वो एंगेज कर रहा है, सो ही इज़ मेकिंग अ वैल्यू जजमेंट. So, no matter how hard the social scientist tries to run away or tries to prove that he is indifferent to any value judgment, he is ultimately making a value judgment. He must then say that it is as legitimate to make the pursuit of safety, income, deference one's sole aim in life as it is to make the quest for truth one's chief aim. सो सोशल साइंटिस्ट ये करेगा कि जितना आपके लिए किसी सच को ढूंढना हो सकता है, उतना ही इंपॉर्टेंट हो सकता है कि आपके लिए एक, मतलब हो सकता है किसी के लिए ट्रूथ एक इम्पॉर्टेंट आइडियल है. सो किसी के लिए सेफ्टी इंपॉर्टेंट आइडियल हो गया, किसी के लिए इनकम इंपॉर्टेंट आइडियल होगा, एंड इट्स नो रॉन्ग. It's absolutely correct, because these are just different ideals and people have different priorities for different ideals. So for one person, one ideal is above everything. For the other person, it's just below everything else. So it is totally correct. There is nothing wrong in that. किसी के लिए सच बहुत important है. No matter what, they will never leave the side of the truth. But for others, the safety of their family is more important. The love for their family is more important. So in whatever condition, that person will always value safety of their loved ones above everything else. उसके लिए चाहे उन्हें झूठ भी बोलना पड़े, ट्रूथ का सहारा ना भी लेना पड़े, वट एवर रीज़न, ट्रूथ का सहारा लेना पड़े या नहीं भी लेना पड़े. So for some person safety is very important, for some person income is very important. So there are different ideals and different peoples have different prime ideals, and then there is nothing wrong with it. Okay, but what happens is that they are engaging in making a value judgment through this process. He thus lays himself open to the suspicion that his activity as a social scientist serves no other purpose than to increase his safety, his income, and his prestige, or that his competence as a social scientist is a skill which he is prepared to sell to the highest bidder. तो जब एक सोशल साइंटिस्ट ये चीज़ क्लेम कर रहा है कि इवन इफ़ यू हैव the safety of your loved ones or the safety of yourself also as a prime ideal, that is no wrong. Now what does that have, what it does is that it leaves the social scientist raw to allegations कि maybe even the social scientist is working for his own safety, the social scientist is working for his own income. So जब इस तरीके से होता है कि social scientist is saying that any other ideal is good, मतलब you can have any ideal as your prime ideal, and that is not wrong. It's not necessary that truth has to be your ideal. ऐसे में वो social scientist भी expose हो रहा है. What if the social scientist ideal is not truth but his own safety, his own income, his own popularity, his own fame? So that changes the scenario totally. Honest citizens will begin to wonder whether such a man can be trusted or whether he can be loyal. ठीक है, so of course they'll wonder कि क्या वो सब social science को यहाँ पे बेचने आए, they're selling it, they're actually not really into it. Maybe it's just their their ideal of safety for themselves or the income for themselves or popularity for themselves, and it's just a part of it. So basically whatever they are saying, how can it be trusted? हो सकता है कि उनका आइडियल इज़ नॉट क्वेस्ट फॉर ट्रूथ बट उनका आइडियल इज़ इनकम फॉर देमसेल्स और द पॉपुलैरिटी फॉर देमसेल्स. सो ऐसे में द सोशल साइंटिस्ट इज जज्ड एंड एक्सपोज्ड to being as disloyal as anybody else. In a word, he will get entangled in the predicament which leads to the downfall of Thrasymachus and his taming by Socrates in the first book of Plato's Republic. So there's a long chain, a long line of dialogues between Thrasymachus and Socrates on so many different topics, justice, might, and right, what is might and what should be, what ought to be duty. So there are so many different dialogues between Thrasymachus and Socrates, and there's one thing that will be noticed, that Thrasymachus was generally in opposition to Socrates. Mostly, or whatever dialogues that you will read between Socrates and Thrasymachus, always Socrates, I wouldn't like to use the word defeats him, but Socrates proves himself over Thrasymachus, and every time they engage in a dialogue, all the points that Thrasymachus points to, that he picks out that these are the wrong points of Socrates, he again engages in it. For example, the Elenchus method, which is the refutation method of Socrates, that is the questioning of it again and again, the refusing of it again and again. Elenchus is a very popular method of Socrates, and it was highly irritable. So that is one of the methods which Thrasymachus condemned to anything. He totally disliked the method, but then again Socrates, using the very same method, used to put down Thrasymachus. Okay. So it goes without saying that while our social scientist may be confused, he is very far from being disloyal and from lacking integrity. So maybe ho sakta hai social scientist is confused about some things, but that doesn't mean that he is disloyal, that he lacks integrity, that he or she is just working for himself and his own interest. His assertion that integrity and quest for truth are values which one can with equal right choose or reject is a mere movement of his lips and his tongue, to which nothing corresponds in his heart or mind. तो जब एक सोशल साइंटिस्ट इस चीज़ को क्लेम कर रहा है कि आपके लिए इंटेग्रिटी कैन बी एन आइडल विच यू कैन चूज, विच यू कैन ऑल्सो रिफ्यूज़, यू कैन ऑल्सो रिजेक्ट, कि नहीं, कि अगर आप इफ़ यू आर फॉलोइंग इंटेग्रिटी, okay, and if you're not able to earn anything for your family, इस केस में इफ़ यू से दैट टुमारो योर आइडियल इज income and safety for your loved ones and your family, and for that you don't value integrity, the social scientist will say it's absolutely right. Why? Well, not absolutely right, but there's no problem with it. Why? Because the social scientist is not to engage in any value judgments. Social scientist आपको नहीं बता सकता या वो इस चीज़ में नहीं engage कर सकता कि what is right, what is wrong, क्या चीज़ सही है, क्या चीज़ गलत है. Because according to modern science, according to positivism, all that matters is observed facts. And the fact can be that, आप झूठ बोल भी सकते हो, नहीं भी बोल सकते हो. There is no problem with it. Scientifically, you can lie as well as you can say the truth. ओके आप सही बोल सकते हो, आप सच बोल सकते हो, आप झूठ बोल सकते हो, क्योंकि वो चीज़ एथिकली सही या गलत होती है. एंड हम इसमें एथिकल जजमेंट्स, मॉरल जजमेंट्स को तो इंक्लूड ही नहीं कर रहे हैं. तो एक सोशल साइंटिस्ट जो कि पॉजिटिविस्टिक सोशल साइंस को फॉलो करता है, साइंटिफिक अप्रोच को फॉलो करता है, जिसमें वो लोग पॉजिटिविज्म फॉलो कर रहे हैं, जिसमें वो लोग फैक्ट्स पे, ऑब्जर्व फैक्ट्स के साथ डील कर रहे हैं, या टोटली डिसरिगार्डिंग एनी वैल्यू जजमेंट्स, वो बोलेंगे कि सच बोलने को आप एक्सेप्ट भी कर सकते हो, आप रिजेक्ट भी कर सकते हो. इट्स टोटली फाइन विद बोथ द केसेस. इट्स योर चॉइस एंड none of them are wrong or right or anything, because they are not to make any value judgments. लेकिन जब एक social scientist इन चीज़ों को बोलता है, according to Leo, he's just moving his lips and his tongues. That means he's just saying it for the sake of saying. In his heart, deep in his heart, in his mind, he knows integrity is important and has to be chosen over non-integrity or disintegrity, whatever the opposite of it is. I have never met any scientific social scientist who, apart from being dedicated to truth and integrity, was not also wholeheartedly devoted to democracy. So scientifically, there is no right and wrong in even lying. Scientifically, आप झूठ बोलो वो गलत नहीं है. But Leo is trying to say and tell us that उन्होंने कभी ऐसा social scientist ही नहीं देखा है who is not following integrity, who is not engaging in truth. Because they may say that they won't make any value judgments. They may say that the value judgments don't matter and truth can be accepted as well as rejected. In their mind, in their heart, they are very integrated. They follow the truth. When he says that democracy is a value which is not evidently superior to the opposite value, it does not mean that he is impressed by the alternative, which he rejects, or that his heart or his mind are torn between alternatives which in themselves are equally attractive. तो जब एक सोशल साइंटिस्ट ऑफकोर्स कभी नहीं बोलेगा कि डेमोक्रेसी इज़ बेटर, because that will include making a value judgment. A true social scientist, positivistic social science, will say that democracy is just a form of government like tyranny, like monarchy, like despotism, like republic, and it's equally the same as the other form of government. The social scientist, a very according to him, on his lips he'll say that democracy is just a form of government like any other form of government, but in his mind he may deem it to be superior and better. So his ethical neutrality is so far from being nihilism or a road to nihilism that it is not more than an alibi for thoughtlessness and vulgarity. By saying that democracy and truth are values, he says in effect that one does not have to think about the reasons why these things are good, and that he may blow as well anyone else to the values that are adopted and respected by his society. So his ethical neutrality is not nihilism, that he's just neutral from making any ethical comments. That does not mean that he doesn't engage, that it's totally nothing, it's totally out of question. By saying that democracy and truth are values, he says in effect that one does not have to think about the reasons why these things are good. So जब वो बोलते हैं कि democracy, truth are just one of the many, that means you don't need reasons to say why it is good or bad. And that he may bow as well as anyone else to the values that are adopted and respected by his society. So भले ही वो सोशल साइंटिस्ट कोई वैल्यू जजमेंट नहीं करेगा, बट इफ हिज सोसाइटी इज फॉलोइंग समथिंग, ही हिमसेल्फ विल बो टू इट and regard it as good. So social science positivism fosters not so much nihilism and as conformism and philanthropism.